Let's try this again, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're having a lot of technical difficulties, and this is the first time I've used this particular software for webinars. So bear with us a little bit while we try to balance everything out, and hopefully you'll get some awesome information that you can apply to your Amazon or e-commerce business. Right now, I'm here with my awesome boss, Ashlin Hadden. Do you want to kind of introduce yourself a little bit more and
Sure.
tell us your background?
Yeah. So Ashlin Hadden, owner of Ashlin Hadden Insurance. I'm located in the great state of Indiana, which don't know if you can tell right now is in the middle of a tornado watch. So it's been great here in Indiana. I own an insurance agency who focuses on e-commerce insurance. We do everything from general liability, product liability, workers' comp, commercial auto, cargo insurance, even your auto, home, and life insurance. So we are your one-stop shop for insurance. We live, breathe, eat all e-com insurance, Amazon, eBay, Wayfair, Jet, Walmart, every platform that you're selling on. So we're very knowledgeable in this space and are here to help protect your assets.
A lot of assets. Big assets.
Your big
Ashley,
assets.
now that you did your sales pitch, which is beautiful, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into this field?
Yeah. So I got into insurance kind of on accident. I was in banking for my first career and was moving and was really kind of just done with that industry. And one of my friends came to me and said, "Hey, Liberty Mutual is hiring. Why don't you go sell insurance?" And I was like, I don't want to be a used car salesman. Like, insurance is just as bad as, used car salesmen. I'm just not interested. And she's like, well, if you do it, then I get a bonus. So would you just go take the interview? So I did the interview, and the gentleman who interviewed me said that this was a man's industry and that those men would outsell you every day. So I said, I'll take the job and I'll prove you wrong. I was the rookie of the year, top rep in the state, like third in the entire company. Really enjoyed helping teaching people about insurance and what their risks are and really what the policies did to protect them or didn't do to protect them. So did that for a couple of years and decided to go out on my own and opened up my own agency. So now we've got 15 beautiful young ladies who help protect everything that you have.
Awesome. So my next question was for you to go kind of more in depth about your services. Obviously, you kind of gave us the overall picture of all the different insurance types, but how did you specifically get into e-com, and what is your passion with regard to
Yeah.
businesses and online sellers?
So when I first started in insurance, we were doing a lot of home, auto, and life insurance. And one of our home clients came to us and said, "Hey, I sell on Amazon, and Amazon's requiring us to have this liability insurance. Can you help me?" And I was like, one, I didn't even know there was third-party sellers on Amazon. I thought Amazon sold everything on Amazon. And I was like, I can't help you. I don't know anything about it. Carriers don't know anything about online retailers. This was 6, 7 years ago. And he didn't give up. He's like, Ashlin, you have got the rest of my business. You need to just do this for me. And I kept really trying to just put him away, like, go away. I can't help you. And he wouldn't let me. So I finally was able to get him a policy. I worked with one of our carriers. And he's like, hey, I'm in this Facebook group. Can I post your information? And I was like, yeah, of course. So really, McClain, it was just like call after call from all of these people that were online retailers, and nobody would talk to them. None of the carriers would insure them. They all felt like the redheaded stepchild. And I don't know, I just kind of felt this calling to help. And I went to my first conference, and it was one of Jim Cochran's conferences. I think it was CES at the time, but now it's like proven. And I fell in love with the community. I fell in love with like things like this, where people get together and really try to help you grow and learn and succeed. And I've never seen that in any other industry. I do restaurants. I insure restaurants. You don't see a bunch of restaurants owners getting together, doing webinars and conferences and really trying to help each other grow. So that's really what I fell in love with, and how I got into ecom is I just fell in love with this. I fell in love with the community.
That's awesome. Sorry guys. Rich says he's on, but I'm trying to figure this out too, or maybe get Chelsea on. While I'm trying to figure this tech issue out, what notable changes have you seen in e-commerce from when you started your business to now? And how has that shifted the focus of your business and or how you help clients?
Yeah. So the biggest change that we've seen from once I started in e-commerce was, 6, 7 years ago. These platforms that you're selling on really didn't require anything. So for example, Amazon said, hey, you are required to have general liability and product liability, but they weren't really policing it. They just said, hey, you need to have it. Then as the years go by, Amazon's starting to get more strict. Bed Bath & Beyond are getting more strict. Walmart's getting more strict. So the biggest changes that we've seen is that all of the legislation is saying, hey, this is not Amazon's issue. This is you as a third party seller bringing products onto the platform. And so Amazon's really, most of the platforms are really pushing back on the third party sellers. They want you to be responsible for the products that you're putting on the platform. They want you to make sure you're doing the testing, that you have good products, that the products that you are selling aren't going to harm someone else. So really the big changes are the platforms are cracking down. Amazon now has it if you have $10,000 or more in 1 month that you have to have the certificate of insurance on file or they're going to suspend you. Years ago, they didn't care. You kind of got to slide under the radar and not really have to provide that. So they're really cracking down. That's the biggest change that we've seen.
And what for Amazon's requirements for insurance, it's pretty specific. They just want you to have general and product liability. Can you just kind of give people an overview of what those entail and maybe why it doesn't cover you fully in the grand scheme of what can happen in your business?
Yeah. So Amazon really just says, I need you to have $1 million for general liability and $1 million of product liability. And the difference of those is, so general liability is going to protect what you do or say as a business. So if I sell this lipstick and I say this lipstick's going to make your lips look voluptuous and sexy, and I buy the lipstick and I don't think it looks sexy and voluptuous, and I sue you for false advertisement, that's general liability. That's what you do or say as a business. Or you make a logo and try to brand register, and your logo has a check mark in it, and Nike comes back and says, hey, that looks a lot like my swoosh, and they sue you for copyright infringement. That's general liability. Then let's say I have this lipstick and then I have allergic reaction and my lips puff up and I have to go to the ER. That's product liability. That's what your products do to harm someone else. And Amazon just says, hey, I need both of those, general liability and product liability. But that doesn't really protect you all the way. Yeah, it's going to protect you if you get sued, but what if you have inventory? What if you've got $50,000 in inventory sitting in your mama's basement and she has a fire? It's not going to cover that. What if you're in your car sourcing and someone steals product out of your car? It's not going to cover that. So the biggest thing that we see is you've got to be careful to make sure that you've got all the right coverages, not just what Amazon and Wayfair and Walmart want you to have to satisfy their requirements.
Well, first of all, welcome, Chelsea. Thank you. I know you weren't supposed to come on for a little bit, but since Rich is having technical difficulties, I really appreciate you coming on.
Of course. Yeah. Happy to.
Hey, girl.
Hi.
So to catch you up right now, we're just kind of introducing you guys, the companies you own, what they provide. And Ashlin just kind of delved into the importance of insurance and why just having the bare minimum on Amazon will really leave a lot of holes in your protection and essentially prepare you for failure. So I still want to focus on the Ashlin, and then Chelsea, I'll get to you in a second.
Sure.
Would you say, I mean, it sounds like to me that when I learn about general and product liability, really those coverages are more for Amazon's sake, so they don't get sued. Because really, product and general liability is about getting sued, and Amazon doesn't want that responsibility. But the likelihood of getting sued, I think, is a lot smaller than, say, your project is recalled. Like you said, your freight went down and got destroyed. Your inventory, like, it was lost somewhere at sea. There's like so many other things that happen that I would argue are way more likely than getting sued. And that's why it's so important that you have these insurance plans so that you're covered for these much more likely scenarios. Would you agree with that?
I mean, we see lawsuits all the time. So I would agree that the likelihood of actually having to pay out $1 million claim for somebody using one of your resellers using one of your products, I agree. The biggest thing that you're going to see these policies for is the legal fees. And what that means is, I use this example all the time. So we had a client who sold something RA, OA, or wholesale. I don't remember which one it was, but they weren't the brand owner. They were just reselling the item. And the person who bought it tripped over the box, broke his hip, and broke his clavicle. Well, that customer sued USPS, they sued Amazon, and they sued our third-party client, our third-party seller. Well, our seller was nowhere responsible for this dude tripping over a box, but he was still listed in the lawsuit. So we know he was never going to have to pay $1 million claim for this idiot to trip over a box. But what he did have to do was they had to defend him. He had to hire the attorney and defend him to get his name dropped from the lawsuit. Well, that's $30,000, $40,000 just in legal fees to get his name dropped from the lawsuit. So if he wouldn't have had insurance, he would have had to do that all on his own. But he had a policy, so he calls me, we call the carrier, we start a claim, and the carrier handled all of that. He was out $1,000. I think his policy was like $1,300 a year. So he was out $1,300 and got the best legal advice to get him dropped out of the lawsuit. Because, insurance companies don't like to pay claims. So they hire the best darn attorneys to get you out of it. So I think the biggest thing people would see is the legal defense along with the policy. And then second, I would say, is inventory. Inventory disappears all the time.
Chelsea can attest to that.
Yeah. And a lot of people say, well, I have homeowners insurance, so, it's going to be covered under my homeowners insurance. And unless you can explain that you have 16,000 toothbrushes because you only use the toothbrush once and then you throw it away, they're going to know it's for a business and they're going to deny the claim. So I think if I had to rank it, I would do your general liability and product liability for sure, because that's what you've got to have to sell on the platforms. Then I would do inventory. And then if you're shipping from overseas, cargo insurance for sure. And then, commercial auto is up there and workers' comp. So, those would be my top 5. If you have a business, those are the 5 things that you definitely should have.
And I think one of the stereotypes people get about insurance agents or brokers is that
we're beautiful.
They really, really try to push all these products on you, right? Like the craziest chances of anything happening. They're like, oh, you need insurance for this, you need insurance for that. And I know from, working with you, you're definitely not like that. How do you assess a situation? Like if someone came to you, what are the measurements you use to decide what kind of insurances they need? And how does that define, say, how much their premiums are?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So we've been for a long time now. We have over 14,000 e-commerce clients. So we've done this a lot. We really just streamline the application process. We know the questions to ask to see how you're sourcing, where you're sourcing, what your risks are. So we ask those questions, and then we'll build you a policy packet and present that to you. If you say, Ashlin, I don't want commercial auto and I don't want workers' comp, that's cool. We don't pressure you on that stuff, but we try to send you a comprehensive package that would cover all of your risks. And then we're a brokerage firm. So we have 50 some companies. We know which carriers like which products. So we do send you the most competitive in your category. So if you're selling supplements, we know what carrier is best rated for supplements. If you're just reselling, we know which carrier is best for that. So we really just look at what you're doing and then build the package around that. And then price. I hate that question because it depends.
Yeah.
Right? It depends on what you're selling, where you're sourcing from, how much you're selling. Insurance is all about risk, more premium. So if I'm selling, a toothbrush, that's going to be cheaper than if I'm selling a fidget spinner with knives on the end of it. If I'm selling $100 a year in product, that's going to be cheaper than if I'm selling $100,000 a year in product. So again, I hate to say it depends, but it depends. Most RAOA wholesalers end up in the $500-ish a year mark. Now, if you're private labeling, that could be different. But it's not as bad as you think. To hire an attorney is what, $600 an hour here in Indiana? I couldn't imagine what it's like in New York or anything like that. So your policy could be the cost of 1 hour of an attorney.
Yeah. And Chelsea, again, I'll bring you in after this question so we can, learn about you and discuss more topics around this. But just because we brought up price, I know that, and we don't want to name names or anything like that, but a lot of people try to go for whatever the cheapest policies are, right? Thinking that they won't need it. In fact, I think in the past, people criticize that some of your policies are higher. Tell us what happened or what will be happening to insurance providers that have very low premiums.
Yeah. So, again, insurance is about risk. Everybody pays in their premiums and then they take that pool and that's what pays the claims. So in the past, there's carriers that have come in and offered coverage for $300 a year. So, we did hear there for a little while, well, your policies are $500 a year. This other company is $300 a year. So we're just going to go with that company. Well, fast forward 3 years, well, that company's going out of business. They didn't charge enough money to pay out claims. So my whole thing is you got to go with a broker, one that knows what you're doing, how you're sourcing and where to go, and then a carrier that's known and established in the industry. This carrier is going to go off the platform and go out of business and get out of this, not out of business, but out of this industry. And there's going to be another one, I'm sure, that comes right back up behind them and say, hey, we're going to do pay as you go, or we're going to do $20 a month or something else. So there's always going to be somebody else coming in saying, hey, we'll do it for less. Sometimes you get what you pay for. And the biggest thing with us is, you're going to go to that carrier that they don't know you. They don't really know what you're doing and how you're sourcing, what the industry standards are, what's going on in the industry. Where my brokerage firm, I've been at 62 conferences in 5 years. I've gone to China sourcing with clients. We are in the know. We know what's going on and we know how to protect you the right way. And when there's stuff coming down the line, we're reaching out to our customers saying, hey, did you know that the certificate of insurance has to have this listed on it? And when that happened last year, we did new certificates, emailed everybody their certificates before anybody even knew that it was coming down the line. These other companies that are just, $20 a month, they're not going to do that stuff. So sometimes you get what you pay for. Be careful.
Chelsea, I miss your face so much. So nice to see you on camera.
Me too.
Last I saw you, we were dancing in Las Vegas.
Yeah. That sounds right.
That's right. Well, it's good to see you, and I appreciate you coming on. Why don't you introduce yourself, your company, give us a little bit of background on you, and just what services you provide.
Sure. Chelsea Cohen. I am the co-founder and CEO of So Stocked, which is an inventory management software for Amazon sellers, and started out in 2014 selling on Amazon. 2018 came around. I felt like I wasn't keeping enough of the money I was making. I felt like I was stocking out a lot. I had made a couple of bad inventory purchases. So I had a bunch of inventory that was costing me a lot in fees and storage fees, and went to look for a solution. That solution wasn't around. There were softwares that out there, but they weren't the type of software that I expected. It wasn't doing what I wanted it to do, didn't make sense to me, and just went into the community, into the masterminds I was a part of, and asked them what they were using, and kept saying, kept getting the answer back, we've tried everything, nothing works right, we're back to spreadsheets. And as an entrepreneur, obviously, when you see, a gap in the market, I got the idea, I think that I could do this better than what's being done. And so I ended up meeting my business partner about 2 weeks after deciding to build a software. And he had built a software that I had already used in 2015 and already known about. And so we just went into business together and launched in 2019 2019. And we've been serving the community with inventory management software, as well as I do a lot of education, a lot of training on how to manage inventory for e-commerce.
And recently you guys just partnered with Carbon 6, right?
Yeah. So SoStock was acquired by Carbon 6 in June of last year. So we're now part of the Carbon 6 family, and we're that inventory piece, the operations piece of their software. And I do a lot of work within the community as well, as part of that transition.
Yeah. Awesome. So just some of the questions that I asked Ashlin. What notable changes have you seen in the e-commerce space from when you started to now? And how has that shifted the focus of your business and how you handle clients?
Sure. When we started, no one wanted to talk about inventory. Inventory was one of those boring subjects. I mean, it's still a boring subject, but it wasn't really something that people worried about. They would send their inventory direct to FBA. So the supply chain was fairly smooth, fairly reliable, and the margins were a lot easier. The fees were a lot lower. So 2020 rolled around. All of a sudden, something no one wanted to talk about. Everyone wanted to talk about. Everyone needed to know about inventory. The supply chain started breaking down. Amazon started restricting inventory for the first time. So you were no longer able to send in as much inventory as you wanted to send. And people started having to use 3PLs. Just a lot more complication and a lot more issues with stockouts, with overstocking. The entire dynamic of, we used to do it was called just in time inventory, which is, you get it in right on time. Now there was a big shift to just in case, where you're holding a lot more inventory just in case something goes wrong, and a lot of things were going wrong. So that was kind of the big shift that we experienced, and all of a sudden booked onto a bunch of podcasts that wouldn't have had us in 2019.
So sorry, this happened during COVID, correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Awesome. Why? So earlier you said that it's, I get it, because working with Ashlin and talking about insurance, I'm always like, I know this isn't the most exciting topic, but we'll try to make it exciting.
Yeah.
So I felt you when you said, and I used to work with Mobley, so I'm very familiar with,
right.
Yeah, supply chain. Why are you passionate about it, and why do you feel like people really need to be paying attention to this stuff?
Yeah, so it's it's that missing piece. I feel like everyone is very focused on marketing, but if you have nothing to market because you've run out of stock, or you can no longer scale because you're spending too much in storage fees, then your business is going to break down. And we've gotten to that point where we're starting to grow up into our businesses. It was this progression that I kind of predicted. Very heavy focus on marketing. And then the next step is inventory, and people have a real big focus on inventory. That's been for the past couple of years. Now we're moving into profit and cash flow, and really getting lean in terms of, recovering those margins because of all of the fees that are stacking up. And inventory is that thing that connects both of those, the marketing and the profit. And it very much impacts your profit. And so that's why I'm very passionate about teaching on it and getting systems in place for sellers, because there's a ton of talk about scale. How do we scale? How do we scale? How do we make money? How do we sell our business? How do we, make profit? And you don't do any of that if you don't have a really solid operations on the inventory side.
So the theme today is how you may be losing money. Mm-hmm. Why don't you explain exactly how that happens with relation to inventory?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so stockouts is an obvious one. If you don't have inventory to sell, you're losing revenue every single day that you're out of stock. And then
sorry to interrupt you, but it also, like if we're talking Amazon, it really impacts your listing ranking, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So and like a domino effect.
Yeah. Like you have to, there's the re-ranking costs, and once in a blue moon, a product just can't recover from a stock out. It's not something that anyone, even the smartest guys in the room, haven't been able to figure out what it is that triggers that. But every now and then, you might have a product that's selling really well, and you buy a bunch of inventory to get back in stock, and it just doesn't fly. And so you have a bunch of inventory. Now you're paying all these storage fees on inventory that is not selling. So there's this kind of, threading the needle when it comes to inventory. You don't want to stock out, but you don't want to overstock, because that gets really expensive. And Amazon increased their fees significantly. They changed the entire structure of storage fees this year. And it's very, very costly, and it's very costly to remove that inventory as well. They've almost doubled their removal fees. So they're just very, very intolerant right now of bad inventory management.
Yeah. So how does SoStock prevent this stuff from happening, or essentially maximize your profits via not being in stock out and other means?
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah. It all comes down to having best practices in place. You can have a software and it only does so much. So we do a lot of education on the reports that you should be sending to your marketing team, how your marketing team should be using those reports, how the inventory team, it historically has been taking a reactive approach, and how can the inventory team now take a proactive approach to their inventory? What does that look like? And then setting things like buffer stock, right? We need to make sure that we have excess stock, and so we never go below, let's say, 30 days of stock. So we need to be placing our orders and placing our transfers in enough time so that it gets there before we hit into our buffer stock. So those are all things that are put in place. You set your minimums, you set your maximums, you create your reports to send to your teams, and all of that just creates a system of best practices for being able to avoid stockouts and avoid overstocking.
Awesome. I'm going to get back to you, but I want to say hi to Rich Goldstein. Thank you for the second appearance.
Yeah. Hey, Rich.
Hello.
You got your internet figured out?
Yeah, I'm actually tethered to my cell phone. I mean, I'm here in Vegas at MGM Skyloft. They had a big party here last night, and so why not use this as my webinar space? So apparently we're having some glitches with the Wi-Fi. I tethered to my phone, so using a cell connection, but apparently it's better. Who knows? But it's working.
We'll find out.
You look a lot clearer,
right.
for sure.
Right. Let's not test it. Let's not.
It's not gonna win.
Let's not jinx it.
So, Mr. Rich Goldstein, introduce yourself, your company, kind of your background, and what you do.
Okay. Yeah. Rich Goldstein. My company is Goldstein Patent Law, and I help people to protect their products and brands, and I help software companies to protect their software platforms. In general, what I do is protecting IP, protecting intellectual property. And as far as background, maybe I didn't answer that, I guess.
How did you get into this specifically?
Yeah, I mean, I have background in electrical engineering. When I was studying electrical engineering, I realized that if I became an engineer, I'd be working on the same project every single day, some little piece of some giant thing, and just did not seem like it would be satisfying to me. I learned about patent law, where it really is about having both legal training and technical training, technical expertise, so you can explain how things are different. And it's been great. It's been a great career.
I will say, as long as I've been in the e-com space, as you guys know, I've worked for a lot of different companies, all related to Amazon. And I feel like I'm pretty well versed in a lot of them. I will say that patenting is probably the one I know the least about. So you're gonna talk dumb down to me essentially when we get into the patent stuff. What notable changes have you seen in e-commerce from when you started your business, and how has it shifted the focus of your business and or how you deal with clients?
Yeah, I mean, I think that initially the focus was on profit while running your business, like selling products at a profit, and therefore the focus on IP was on protecting that profit. Now the focus is on making the most money when you exit, and so the focus with IP has also shifted to be on maximizing your payout because of the IP you own. And I mean, Scott Dietz did a presentation recently, and he said that 50% of the money you make from your business is when you exit.
Yeah.
And it might even be higher than that. So I think that's the big change that I've seen in e-commerce is from profit while running a business to the payout you get when you exit.
Now, explain to the audience why patenting is so important and when and why you do it, because obviously there's very specific laws around that. I hear it's a very long and expensive process. So what, like, as I said, what is the value behind getting a patent? And as you said, how does that affect the value of your company when you exit?
Yeah, so I mean, the value ultimately of a patent is in being able to stop other people from making, using, or selling the product that you've protected. And so that's the value while you're running your business, being able to stop other people from doing the same thing, stop other people from doing a me too on your differentiated product. But then when you go to exit, people that are buying your company will pay a higher multiple because of the IP that you have. And if it's good IP, IP that really prevents competitors from doing what you're doing, it could double the multiple. So it could mean millions more. But even if it's bad IP that protects against maybe just a specific version of your product, but people that are copying it don't have to copy that specific version, it's still going to stretch the multiple a bit, and it's still going to give you an ROI. So that's why it's important, and that's why it's valuable. And when to do it, the best time to do it is before you launch your product. Because in most of the world, once you launch the product and make it public, then you immediately lose the rights to ever patent it if you haven't already applied. In the US, there's still a 1-year grace period. So if you start selling and you haven't yet applied for a patent 1 year from that date, then you'll lose the rights altogether. But in terms of the process, in general, it just starts with preparing a patent application, which explains in detail what the invention is all about. And that gets filed. That gets you what's called patent pending status that we see all the time. And then eventually it's going to be reviewed by an examiner at the patent office. If they approve it, you've got an issued United States patent that you could enforce. It might get rejected. And if so, then we argue for it to be approved.
This question is for both of you. With relation to the services you provide, what would you say the 3 biggest mistakes you see sellers making? And I'll go with Chelsea first and then Rich.
Sure. I would say some of those mistakes, being very reactive with inventory. We kind of brought that up before. Not having systems or having very few systems. And one of the systems that is missed more than anything is synchronizing your marketing and your inventory teams, making sure that you have marketing data going to inventory so that they can plan on putting the marketing plans into the inventory plans. and inventory data going to marketing so that those inventory needs, such as overstocking or stocking out, get accounted for with the inventory. And then the other one I would say would be not looking at your supply chain, not reassessing your supply chain and seeing opportunities to reduce your spend. Things like reducing your packaging size. That's going to reduce your storage fees and your fulfillment fees. You can also get more units per carton, more units per pallet. Reassessing your carton and your pallet optimization. A lot of people are not fully optimized. The size of their boxes don't fit as well on the pallet as they could. So they have less surface area and less volume that they're taking up on that pallet. So less units per pallet, less units per carton, which means that you have more pallets and more cartons, and you're paying fees on all of these things. It's a lot of work to do this. We've got some free tools that help with this, but then you have to go back to your supplier. So there's a lot of legwork that comes into reassessing and restructuring this, but the amount of money that you can save is very, very high, can be very, very high. And it's something that's worth taking the time to do it.
Yeah. What about you, Rich?
Well, I think the number one mistake that sellers make is not doing their trademarks. Trademarks are a no-brainer. You need to file your trademark. You can build a business that's potentially sellable for $10 million, and then the person who's going to acquire it walks away from the deal because you never got your trademark that you could have spent $2,000 getting.
Now, just to interrupt you real fast, explain the difference between a trademark and a patent.
Absolutely. So patents protect products, what makes a product different, or software. And like it protects functionality, it protects design. Trademark is for branding. It's for the name of the product, the logo of the product. It's kind of like the way in which people look at a product and say, "Oh, that's a Nike sneaker." Those elements of branding are what trademarks are for. And trademarks follow a similar process as patents. It gets filed, gets reviewed, and it gets approved. But trademarks cost a lot less than patents. And so it really is a no-brainer to do your trademarks for any brand that you are selling.
Awesome.
So that's one. Another really common mistake is, assuming that you could just change a little to get around the patent. You need to understand what it is that the patent stands for, what it is that the patent is protecting before you know what is the thing that you might be able to change to get around the patent. So people often get into trouble just thinking, "Oh, well, I changed it a little bit. It's a little bit wider and it doesn't have this part." Well, maybe that's not what the patent's for. So that's a major mistake that people make. And lastly, I would say is just, not learning about IP, and then kind of making poor decisions because they don't understand IP. Investing a few hours into learning about IP may be the highest leverage thing that you can do in your business, and you'll know how to handle situations way better.
I fully agree. I will share the first product that we launched, which was our best seller. We made millions of dollars off of it. There is a patent in Europe, but not in the US. So we were able to capitalize on that and leverage that because the patent only existed overseas. And so we weren't able to sell it in Europe, but we were able to make a lot of money in the US.
Wow. Awesome.
That's awesome. Rich, I'm going to have you stay on. Chelsea, I have to let you go to get Lee in here. Sure. Thank you so much for joining us. I really, really appreciate you, and I miss you.
Thanks, guys. See you soon.
Bye. Bye. All right, Lee, I'm bringing you on, buddy. Sorry, guys. Again, I'm new to this particular software. I think I'm doing it right. While we're waiting for Lee to come on, Rich, obviously you can't name names or anything, but can you give an example of a situation, like a real life situation, where either patent name went wrong or trademarks went wrong and it really messed up the whole process in the company?
Yeah, I can give you a situation, and actually I can name names in this case too. So a client of mine was recently on Shark Tank, The company's called Chubby Buttons, and what they make is a device that you kind of could put on as an armband. It's a bunch of buttons that's like a play, pause, the type of controls that you would want for your cell phone when you're playing music or answering phone calls. But you can use it while you're wearing a glove. So that was the idea, fat buttons, chubby buttons. So they applied for Shark Tank a few years ago. And there was a question that was asked of them, which is, have you ever received a cease and desist letter? And apparently they had. So they couldn't get even to the next round on Shark Tank because of that. And they came to me and said, are we really infringing this patent? What do you think? And we discussed all of that. And we also discussed the possibility of acquiring the patent. And it was actually a portfolio of patents. So that's what we did. We pivoted. We acquired the portfolio of patents. We made a good deal considering what they were buying. And so we were able to use those patents to actually shut down some of their competitors. And also they got approved for Shark Tank, and they were filmed, and getting filmed for Shark Tank isn't the same as getting aired because they don't pick many of the people that they even film segments with, but they got approved to be aired too. And their segment aired just recently, a few weeks ago. So that was an unusual situation. And it really came about because we looked at what the patents were for. We realized, okay, these are important patents. We acquired them, and we were able to use them to stop competitors. And they were able to fulfill their dream of getting on Shark Tank.
Awesome. Rich, stay right there. I'm going to bring in Lee Loree. How are you? Thank you for joining.
I'm doing great.
Were you hanging out in the audience for a while?
I was, and I just wanted to make sure I wasn't doing something wrong. And hey, Rich, on your comment there about the IP, I actually, one of the first things that I invented, I own a number of patents over the years. I ended up getting a patent for a really early wearable device. Invented a product called Sleep Tracker that I ended up selling to a company out in Silicon Valley. And the only reason they bought it was because of the trademarks. We were able to secure some patents, but the patents were fairly narrow in scope, and so they ended up being moderately interesting to the acquirer. But the trademarks that we'd protected, we owned a whole bunch of different terms around the term sleep tracker. And so we get into the nuances of trademarking and obviousness and descriptive and things of that nature, but it hadn't been disputed for over a decade while we had been using it. And so the statute of limitations had passed. And so we had an amazing trademark portfolio that we were able to exit to a company out on the West Coast.
And was the business profitable at the time that you sold it?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, and a lot of times that's what IP does, is it leverages the profitability. I mean, a big lesson is that patents and trademarks aren't typically worth much in a vacuum, but if it's attached to a profitable company, then it does, it does increase the value of what you get when you exit. So, and thanks for telling me that story, Lee. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, for sure. The trademarks, and it's ironic because the patent stuff that we spent all this time and money on ended up not being as successful, or didn't end up adding the value that the trademarks did, that were relatively easy to do. So to your point earlier about how the trademarks are easy and they're absolutely necessary, like I'm a living, breathing example of how they absolutely paid out for the work we had done on them.
Awesome.
And I guess this is a kind of obvious comment, but with everything moving online as opposed to like mom and pop shops and brick and mortars, because one product can be seen by the whole world at once, the need for patents and trademarks must be exponentially high.
Yeah, I mean the game absolutely changed quite a bit. I mean, one of the things that's really changed with the online platforms is the old way was if you wanted to enforce something, you had to go to court. These days, platforms like Amazon have procedures for enforcing your IP that don't involve spending hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars. So I think that's one of the major things that's shifted in the favor of IP owners.
Awesome. Lee, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little about you, your background, and Stellar Investigators.
Sure. So I'm one of the founders of Seller Investigators. We're a refund recovery company on Amazon. I mentioned earlier, I'm sort of a serial entrepreneur. I've had a number of different businesses in a variety of different spaces. But this current, business that we're running essentially looks at inventory when it's in the Amazon warehouse and determines where there are discrepancies that are to the bad for the individual seller because of the way Amazon handles your inventory.
And how long have you guys been around?
We've been doing a little over 6 years. And as Chelsea earlier, we were also acquired by Carbon 6 back in the fall of last year, back in September of last year.
Awesome. Rich, I'm going to let you go because I'm trying to stagger people in. But I did have one last question for you. What is the best piece of advice you have ever received regarding entrepreneurship and success? Putting you on the spot.
You're on mute. We lost your voice.
Yeah, we can't hear you. Sign language. Let's do charades.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I was able to convey, just wait one moment while I unmuted. I've got a window washer up here on the 29th floor, kind of right outside the window here. And it was just, I muted.
But the irony is, I've been in this suite, by the way.
Yeah.
Rich, do you own that suite or do you just use it a lot?
I am lucky enough to get it. It's called Barbara Streisand Suite. I'm lucky enough to get this to throw parties from time to time. I say from time to time. I actually did one 2 weeks ago, and then now here today. It feels like I'm always here.
Yeah, I mean, I was there at Prosper just a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, and I know, and people have been asking me like, "Hey, do you live in Vegas?" No, I live in New Jersey. It just seems like I'm here all the time. But I'm sorry for the diversion here. So best piece of advice you've ever received, I'd say is, sell one unit of your product. Just figure out how to sell one, and then look at how you sold it, who they are, what they bought, in general, what worked about that one sale, and then do it over and over and over again. So, as opposed to a lot of times people try to like build a team and figure things out, and like it's just sell one, and then who is that person you sold it to, and then where do you find more people like that? I think that's the best advice.
Yeah, I remember one of the things that really resonated with me when I was working as the marketing department for another company. Everyone was really into, before they sold their product, they were all about trying to figure out their avatar. Like, what's their target audience? Who's their avatar? And I have found with so many people that shifts once you actually start selling, like you said. It's not always the same person that you want it to be or that you intended for it to be. And you need to be open to the fact that you might have a completely different audience than you originally anticipated.
Yeah, like I have a friend of mine who sells it's called Dugout Mugs. They sell like it's a baseball bat that's hollowed out to make a beer mug. And do like 30 million in sales or something like that. And like one of the most surprising things to them is they thought that their target market was the male sports fans, but it turned out that their target market was the wives.
Yeah. Yeah. You really don't know. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Rich. I really appreciate it. You enjoy your time in Vegas.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Good seeing you, Rich.
Okay. You too.
All right. And the finalists, I don't know if were you on from the beginning?
I had been on since about, what time is it now? Like right around 1 o'clock, maybe.
Okay. We're like, and I explained this already from the beginning, but this is all new technology. Usually I use different webinar things. So I'm trying to like balance, because you can only have 2 people in the room at once. And so anyway, thank you for being part of the practice.
Of course, no problem. Listen, like being an entrepreneur is learning on the fly. And, that wasn't going to be my piece of advice, but it certainly is a good one. You need to learn how to sort of manage things that aren't perfect. As an entrepreneur, you go to war with the army you have, not the one you want. And you just got to keep doing what you're doing until it works.
So you started off with your introduction, but I'd love for you to just go a little bit more deep into how your company operates. And as the topic of the series, why you could be losing a lot of money and how to recover that.
Yeah, so I mean, essentially what happens is when you sell on Amazon in the FBA platform, and everybody listening to this who's on FBA knows this, but it's consignment. And when you're selling on consignment, inevitably there are errors that happen around that relationship. We have the biggest Amazon seller on the entire platform. It's over $1 billion that's on our platform. And even they, at $1 billion, doesn't even make up 1% of the FBA platform for Amazon. So no matter how gigantic you are still very small in comparison to Amazon's overall FBA business. As a result of that, nobody is really mission critical to Amazon. And so as a result, Amazon ends up, it works out to be about 1% of net sales. If you were in a traditional retail environment, it would be 2%, which would just be called shrinkage, which basically means loss, theft, damage, unsellable. For whatever reason, this product isn't new anymore with tags, and we're going to get rid of it. And so we're not going to pay you for that product when you send us an invoice. Amazon doesn't do that because it goes into a warehouse. Theoretically, 100% of what you ship in should be at the warehouse and be sold to customers. There should be no drop in that sort of scenario. However, Amazon sees millions of products that come in all the time. As a result of that, it makes it very difficult for them to be 100% accurate. On top of which, if they had human people actually physically counting inventory, there'd be human error because of just the sheer volume of it. So they do the best they can. They weigh and they measure your inventory when it comes into the warehouse. And when they do that, if they have on file incorrect weights and dimensions, they're always going to miscount your inventory. Always. Literally every single time you ship it in. And a lot of people don't even realize that. And then in addition to that, they ship it intra warehouses. They do all kinds of different things with your inventory in order to make it work for Amazon, which is certainly within their purview. But as a result of that, you just have this like leakage that happens in your business. And while 1% may not sound like a lot, it used to be that Amazon businesses, had 40, 50% margins. Now, even like nutraceuticals, which have the highest margin of most categories on Amazon, they don't have even those kinds of margins. Nobody is running in those kinds of margins anymore. The average business on Amazon, if they're doing a good job, is running a 20% net margin, which means that 1% of sales is really like 5 points EBITDA. And that's a lot. You can't do very much to an Amazon store where you move your EBITDA 5% or 5 points, with signing up for a service and like kind of getting out of the way of it. So, we are providing a service that effectively everybody on the platform should be looking at. And if you're not looking at us, you should be doing it with somebody else. But this is, I don't mean to say it's a profit center for Amazon, because I don't know that Amazon's doing it maliciously. It's just they're so big, there is inevitably going to be problems. And if you don't stand up for yourself, you're never going to get your money back. They're not going to give it back to you.
So how exactly does it work? Like if someone wants to do a audit or something, is it like a one-time thing where you guys look at it, or you want a subscription? Like how does the payment and operations go?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have a free audit. It's no obligation. It takes anywhere from 24 to 48 hours for us to run. You can sign up for it at sellerinvestigators.com. It's pretty obvious when you get on the site, but it gives you, kind of a link to do it. It's a couple of step process because Amazon wants to make sure nobody nefariously gets, hold of your FBA account or your Seller Central account. We're an approved vendor, so nothing to be worried about there. Amazon audits us a couple of times a year. But essentially you sign up for that audit. Couple days later, we give you a report that indicates sort of where you've got problems or where we find money that we can go after. And then assuming you give us a credit card, we move forward. We try very hard to make it white glove. We can dig up a lot of the documentation we need from within your FBA or your Seller Central store. But on occasion, if we need it specifically around inbound shipping issues, we end up, contacting you by way of our case managers that will reach out to you and ask you for documents that are related to a particular shipment.
Without naming names, can you give the audience an example of a client you might have had that the results that you found were astonishing?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, almost every day that happens. We onboard somewhere in the neighborhood between 40 and 50 clients a day at this point, on average. And I would say that, there are certainly some that are relatively small as stores. We take all comers. Obviously the bigger a store is and the more ASINs it has, and just the more sales velocity it has in it, just the more complexity that business exhibits. And therefore, the more likely they are to have a significant need for our service. But that doesn't mean that we can't help servers that are doing $50,000 a year on the platform. We certainly can. And we have clients that are on the platform that are like that. But yeah, I mean, we've had clients that have gotten back millions of dollars. We've had clients that have gotten back $150,000. In fact, I think just in the last 30 days, we've had 3 or 4 people get back north of $100,000. And that's a lot of money. I mean, I don't care how big your store is, getting a $100,000 check for not doing anything is a pretty remarkable day for most businesses.
Yeah, that's incredible, actually. With relation to, and actually the question I had asked the others was with relation to your services, what are the 3 biggest mistakes you see people making? But it doesn't even specifically have to do with recalling inventory and stuff. But what are the 3 biggest mistakes you think sellers make?
Specifically within our space, I don't want to, I don't want to speak out of tune about talking about so stocked or legal or anything like that. But specifically around our business, I would say, and this is in no particular order. Number one, either you're ignorant to this, that it exists, or you think it sounds like it's too good to be true. And, your mom always told you as a kid, like, anything that sounds too good to be true is probably a scam.
Yeah.
And the idea that you're going to sign up for my service and I'm going to get you back tens of thousands of dollars, for some people, that seems fishy. And I understand that, but it's not. We are Amazon approved. We've never had a letter. We've never had a problem. We have thousands of people on our platform. Like this is in fact exactly what we say it is. So number one, I would say it's being ignorant or being scared of it being something that, could be detrimental to your business. This is something clearly indicated on your Seller Central agreement that you have the ability to have a third party do this. And we know the lanes, we know where to stay, we know what to do and what not to do. We're not going to put your store in a problem. So number one, I would say, is just being aware of what's available. Number 2 would be that you think you can do it yourself. And we tend to see this more on the smaller side than the bigger side of stores. But the entrepreneur who is running the ship thinks that nobody can do it as good as they can. And that's a huge problem, not just in our space, but in a more general term. As an entrepreneur, if you ever intend to really scale your business, you've got to get out of the way of working in it so that you can work on it. And so we talk about that a lot with clients. We try to get you back your money, but we're also really trying to buy you time so that you can work on things that really impact your business. I'm not going to grow your business. I'm going to grow your EBITDA, but I'm not going to physically grow your business. Chelsea back at SoStock can grow your business by you not being out of stock and things like that. Mm-hmm. That's not what we do. We clean up. We aren't forward facing. We're fixing problems that happened in the past. Yeah. So I would say thinking you can do it all yourself would be number 2. And kind of to dovetail with that, I would say it's working with us or a competitor. I don't care if you're working with a service, believing that they are doing the best job possible. It is free to get an audit. I would encourage you, if you work with another service, to do an audit and stalking horse with us. Find out if we find more money. If we do, the rate you're paying is not what you're actually physically paying, because if we find 10 or 15% more money, or if someone did it for us, I'm not saying they don't, I'm not aware of it, but we on a regular basis are finding 10 to 15% more money than most companies in our space. That 10 or 15%, essentially you're giving that money to Amazon the same way you would have to our competitor, except that instead of your competitor only getting a percentage, all of it's going to Amazon. And so your rate, and our rack rate is about 25% for people. we're running a special here today at 20% and the first 500 free. But the first 500 of refunds free. But if you have a competitor and they're charging, let's just say 18%, I don't know, I'm making up a number, but it could be 25, whatever you want it to be. But they're not getting back 10 or 15% of the money you're owed. That means that your rate is closer to 40% on the work they're doing. So it's really not a good deal. So being aware and testing and A/B testing against competitors to make sure you're getting the best deal is super important. So I would kind of lean that into number 2. And then quickly, number 3 is more specifically how you can fix something within your own business. On inbound shipments, we need documentation. That's a fact. Amazon requires it for every case we file. Sometimes we can grab it out of Seller Central. Sometimes we can create environments where the client can help us do it. Sometimes we need to request it from the client, what have you. But if you don't keep a depository somewhere on your system that you keep track of all your inbound shipping documents, bill of lading, invoices, PODs, whatever else, when I come to you and say, hey, I need this, and let's say that it's 6 months ago that the shipment went in, your carrier, FedEx, UPS, whomever you're using, traditionally they keep files for 90 days and then they purge it so that their systems aren't overloaded with all this data. Mm-hmm. And so if I come to you 6 months in from a shipment and you don't have the documentation, unfortunately, that's a case we can't file. And in our world, we can look back 9 months on missing inbound shipments or for problems on inbound shipments and 18 months on lost and damaged. So there is a pretty good look back period where if you don't have these systems in place, that look back period, you may not benefit as much as you potentially could.
Yeah. I just noticed the time we're actually going over. Before we leave, I want to ask you the same question I asked Rich, which is, what is the best piece of advice you've ever received regarding entrepreneurship and success? And how do you apply it to your business?
Yeah, I mean, our business was a little bit unique in that it didn't take a lot of capital to get started. Mm-hmm. We built the software and then kind of grew the business as we needed it. Kind of like Rich was saying, sell one product and figure it out. That was very much of our mantra. But mm-hmm. what I learned early on, and I mentioned earlier, I had a wearable device when Rich was on. What I learned from early in my entrepreneurial career was that someone told me, as an entrepreneur, it's really important to understand the difference between time risk and money risk. And if you're an entrepreneur, if you can find a partner to help carry some of that risk, you're not double dipping, because if you're investing your 401k plan in, this new idea you have and you're not working, if it doesn't work out, you've got a double whammy. You've lost your savings and you've lost the time where you were doing it. And I don't mean to be negative that you're not going to be successful, but if you can mitigate some of that risk by having an investor, for example, or having a partner, or having things that allow you to share some of that burden, being successful becomes less about, oh my God, if this doesn't work, this is the end of days, than, oh, this is a great opportunity. I think I've managed my risk appropriately and I'm going to do this for X amount of time. And if it works out, great. And if it doesn't, I'm going to pivot. That pivot gets really hard if you finance the business and you've got your all of your time in it.
Absolutely. I agree. Great advice. Thank you, Lee, for coming on. I super, super appreciate it. I was wanting to do a Q&A session, but now that I can't have everyone on, I can't really do that. When I shut this off, the audience members will receive a flyer that says how to contact everyone, what a lot of discounts. Lee, what was the discount you offered again?
Yeah, so our normal rate is 25% of what we're successful getting back. So your money, 100% of the money flows back into your account, and then we take 25% of it. Today, we're running a special for people listening here. We're going to do it for 20%, and we're going to offer you the first $500 in refunds are free. So if for whatever reason you have problems, if you want to sign up for the service and you want to run the audit, feel free to email me. It's Lee@sellerinvestigators with an S at the end, Lee@sellerinvestigators.com, and I'd be happy to help you. Or, McClain, you've got some information that you can share.
Yeah, when this closes out, you guys will see a flyer with all the discount information, how to contact Lee, how to contact Chelsea and Rich. And also Ashlin is also having a discount for webinar attendees. It is a free audit of your account and your current insurance policies, and a 25% off the service fee. So again, after we close this out, you will see that. And I will also send everyone individually an email with this video and with that discount information. So I hope you all enjoyed yourself, and sorry again for the beginning. It's just technology. Have a good one, Lee.
Hey, thank you. Have a nice day.